When people talk about bad speech, one of the first things that comes to my mind is racist speech. Everyone agrees that's bad. The Chronicle of Higher Education is read mostly by the grand poobahs of academia. Now, one of the Chronicle's contributors, until she was fired this month after being accused of racism, was Naomi Schaefer Riley. So, Naomi, what did you write that made you a racist?
Well, I wrote a blog post criticizing black studies. It was a reaction to a piece that appeared in the Chronicle that touted new, exciting research by graduate students in the Black Studies department at Northwestern. One of the dissertations mentioned was a history of black midwifery. One of the dissertations mentioned was explained how institutional racism was to blame for the housing crisis.
Let's do one at a time.
Sure.
What's wrong with a history of black midwifery?
Well, I said that it seemed kind of irrelevant and that it seemed like very obscure academic research, and I've criticized obscure academic research in other departments, and so why not in black studies? The second dissertation was explained how institutional racism is to blame for the housing crisis in America.
It's a theory.
It is a theory, and I suggested that perhaps the millions of white homeowners who had experienced losing their homes were just collateral damage in this whole racist plot. And then the third dissertation I criticized accused Clarence Thomas and Thomas Sowell and John McWhorter, three black sort of conservatives, of engaging in assault on civil rights in America because they were against affirmative action.
Again, opinion, stupid opinion, I would say, but opinion. You wrote this. Black Studies dissertations were a collection of left-wing victimization claptrap, so irrelevant no one will ever look at them. So that's true of a lot of most dissertations.
Yes, yeah.
Black Studies today seem to rest on the premise that nothing much has changed in the country in the past half-century. Shh, don't tell them about the black president.
Yes.
So what happens then?
So the post goes up on a Sunday night, and the comments...
Ironically, on a blog called Brainstorm.
Yes, yes. The post goes up on a Sunday night, and the comments start to pour in the next few days. And this was not new. I had been blogging for the Chronicle for about a year, and there were always obnoxious commenters who wrote in things about me and how I didn't know what I was talking about because I don't have a PhD. And by Wednesday, the Chronicle had asked me if I would please respond to these comments. I said, well, look, these are the criticisms against me, that I'm a racist, that I don't have a PhD, that I didn't read the entire dissertations before writing a blog post, which is one of my favorites.
Was that true?
No, of course I didn't read the dissertations before writing a 500-word blog post. Who has time to read dissertations before writing a blog post? I mean, this is an absurd standard. The barrage continued, and 6,500 academics signed a petition asking for me to be fired from my gig at the Chronicle.
And you were?
Well, at first the reaction from the Chronicle was they said, we understand you're upset, but we see this as an invitation to debate. That was the end of the week. And then 4 days went by, and then they fired me.
So maybe you are a racist. I mean, it makes me want to ask your relatives if you're a racist. In fact, your closest relative happens to be in the audience. So your husband, Jason, would you come up and join the table? And is she a racist? If she is a racist, she has an odd choice in husbands.
I would agree, John, yes.
So what's you're a writer, an editorial writer for the Wall Street Journal.
Yes, yes.
What was your reaction to all this?
Well, Naomi is no shrinking violet. I knew she was perfectly capable of pushing back hard, and she did. She's written 2 books on higher education. She's interviewed countless professors and students and parents of students at dozens of colleges across the country, and that is the experience that informed her blogs on higher education. So she's perfectly capable of debating anyone on the facts.
So the Chronicle is this timid, politically correct organization, or what's your take?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. They have to answer for their bottom line and who's going to subscribe if they all hate the Chronicle. But I also think, they're reflective of the atmosphere in higher education. It's a closed bubble, and if you say anything that distresses the academics, they will sort of spit you out.
And race is especially touchy. I mean, you were bloggers said Shafer Riley does not deserve a platform for her racism. This is racially motivated bullying.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said, I have criticized a number of academic disciplines. I really think that a lot of what are called area and ethnic studies right now are not legitimate academic disciplines. I think they're political causes. I mean, they're basically founded on the premise that racism or other, ethnocentrism or whatever you want to call it is to blame for the problems of whatever racial minorities you're talking about. And you start from that premise, and then you can ask the questions. So whereas most academic disciplines sort of begin from the questions, they begin from the answers.
And Jason, you've had angry pushback from people. You're writing for a conservative publication. People who did not know you're black.
Yes, it's not an uncommon experience. But I've written pieces in the newspaper over the years about resorting to racism as a sort of all-purpose explanation of all that's wrong with black America as not being something that jibes with the facts. And I've gotten letters to the editors that say things like, well, I guess Mr. Riley has never been a young black man in New York trying to catch a cab at night. I believe we actually ran that letter in the paper. My mother got quite a kick out of it.
Now, does race matter when you're talking about race? Outside the studio, people told us that it absolutely does matter.
One person can say something and it can mean something completely different based on their race.
If I'm black and I'm saying something against a black person, normally it's okay. But if a white person says something against me, then there may be a problem.
Your reaction?
Well, I think that that's definitely the public perception, whether you like it or not. I mean, we can sort of sit here and laugh, and I can have this defense of, obviously everybody laughs once they find out my husband is black, but you're definitely protected in some ways, if you say, oh, well, you can't call me a racist because I have a black husband and a couple interracial children here. But the bottom line is it shouldn't matter. I mean, you should be able to engage in legitimate discourse about the facts, as I said, and critique academic disciplines without people resorting to, engaging in personal attacks against them.
And think about... And I also think about the message that Naomi's critics are sending to these young black academics, which is that there is no legitimate criticism of their discipline, and anyone who thinks otherwise is a racist.
I'm guilty of bad speech. My ideas are backwards and hateful. This is colorofchange.org, the group that takes credit for getting Pat Buchanan fired. About me, they say, it's time Fox drops Stossel. And they'll go after the network with a public campaign unlike anything we've pursued to date. Yikes. Then Media Matters chimed in. By airing Stossel's repugnant comments, Fox legitimizes his indefensible position. What did I say that was indefensible? I'll explain in a moment, but first I want to say that I've noticed that most everyone says they support free speech.
I should be able to say whatever I want.
I don't think anything should be illegal.
Everyone should have their own right to say what they want.
Except if we instead ask what should be done about hateful speech or sexist speech, then many people want the speaker punished.
Fired, probably, depending on what they say.
They should treat it like they're actually performing a crime.
So what was my crime? Well, what I said that made some left-wing groups demand that Fox fire Stossel was an opinion. I said I thought part of the Civil Rights Act violates Americans' right to freedom of association. Most of the Civil Rights Act is about banning discrimination by government. That's good. But I think the parts that banned private discrimination went too far. So on Megyn Kelly's show, I said this. Private businesses ought to get to discriminate. And I won't ever go to a place that's racist, and I will tell everybody else not to, and I'll speak against them. But it should be their right to be racist. For that, they demand that I be fired. But think about it. I condemned racism. I said I'd boycott a racist's business. But my heresy was to agree with Rand Paul, who then was a Republican Senate candidate, when he said on Rachel Maddow's show, part of the Civil Rights Act went too far. That it does go too far seems like common sense to me. I think a Black Students Association and the Korean Grocers Association should have the right to exclude non-blacks or non-Koreans. A gay baseball team ought to have the right to exclude straight players. Government must not discriminate, but private individuals should have a right to associate with whomever we choose. For this, activists of the left demand that I be fired. The totalitarian left does not want such ideas even heard. In my book, I reveal that my bosses at ABC would not let me do stories on certain topics. That made me angry, made me move to Fox. But much as I resent the narrow-mindedness of my ABC bosses, I can't complain that I was censored. When a private company refuses to air something or fires a commentator, that's not censorship. That's editorial control. It's their job to say yes or no. If I wanted to say things that ABC did not like, I could go elsewhere. And eventually, I did. America has plenty of media companies. If I get fired here, maybe I'll get a job elsewhere. We have choices. But we have only one government. No real choice there. And that's why it's important that government not censor. If you disagree with me, argue with me. Shun me. Boycott me. Just don't bring in government to settle the issue.